Welcome, everyone, back to the Sovereign Helper podcast. Today is episode 155. And the theme of today is why is it so hard for so many helpers to truly love themselves? I feel like I've been preparing for this podcast episode like my whole life. Not because self love has been easy for me or anything like that, quite the opposite. Because it's been something that I think, I was always drawn to reading self-help books since I was a child. So, of course, I came across that concept very early in my journey. And although intellectually I understood that self-love was important, it felt really confounding, like really like impossible. Like, how does somebody do that? And I had all these well, isn't that selfish? Aren't I supposed to be focused on loving others? I mean, it's been a long journey with this. So I really want to talk about this today because this whole month, if you haven't heard, I am dedicating it to the practice of self-love, to really talk and specifically for helpers, how it creates more impact, how it actually expands your leadership, how it actually is a way for you to express your true power, how it is actually our divine responsibility to commit to this practice. And so today is going to be like a little preview of the masterclass I'm going to have on February 25th this month, which is called More Self-Love Creates More Impact. I'll have the link in the comments so you can sign up. That is a free masterclass. But everything this month, all the offerings I do are going to be about that because we need to hear this over and over and over. So I've got my notes here because I don't want to forget some things and I don't want to, there's so much I want to say about this that I could easily just kind of get off tangent. So I want to stay present here. So I want you to think about how, first, let me say this. I believe self-love is challenging for most humans. So I'm not suggesting that only helpers have this problem. However, I do think helpers, and when I use the word helper, I mean whether you're a therapist, a wellness professional, whatever career you're in, or if you're retired, but you have the helper heart. You are someone that is here to help others, to uplift humanity, to be an example of what's possible, to share your gifts, to bring about creative solutions. Maybe you see the world very differently than others, and that's your contribution. Maybe you share your artwork, maybe you're writing books, whatever it is. So specifically, I want to talk about why is self-love, lack of self-love, such an epidemic for helpers? Because if you think about it, it logically doesn't make sense because let me slow down. Helpers are designed to express love to others very easily. So for example, maybe you're a really good listener. Maybe you can be really patient with others. Maybe when others are quick to judge, you have an easier time accessing compassion. Maybe you're really good at seeing the potential in others, even when they don't see it themselves. Right? It's like, and I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm not saying you're always doing that 100% of the time. But I know as a helper, that's something that you're wired to do. That comes so naturally to you. I was saying this in something else I did. I don't even remember what. That, so many of my clients are therapists or coaches. But even if they're not, even if they're like in a grocery store, they'll often run into someone and in conversation, inspire them, help them feel more optimistic. Be an example of what could be possible for them. So in a lot of ways, you are like wired to express love. And yet, even though you're wired that way, even though that might come easier to you than to a lot of humans, when it comes to you expressing that amount, that level of patience, kindness, compassion, optimism, high regard towards yourself, that is challenging. Now, I'm not talking about like extreme self-hatred, like harming yourself, cutting yourself, or just like being really awful towards yourself. Although I think many of us have experienced that in the past. I've shared those stories before. In my childhood, especially in my teenage years, oh my gosh, I went through such painful years of really like hating myself, and like that expressing itself in like body dysmorphia, like meaning like I would look at myself and was convinced I was so unattractive and hated my body. And it was like so many problems. I have so much compassion for myself. It was a very challenging time. So I went through those extremes, but most of us now at this point aren't in that extreme, right? Maybe you're like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to do that. But now, because you've gone to therapy, or you've worked with coaches, or you've prayed, or you've read, you've learned, you're not in that extreme place anymore. However, there's still that low grade self-criticism. It's like this constant hum in the background. This like inner tone that can be harsh. This shoulding, right? Maybe you feel impatience with your journey. Like, why am I still struggling with this? I should be over this already, or I should be further ahead, or you compare yourself to others, or you doubt. This is one that can be very subtle. You keep holding back from stepping into leadership, stepping into the spotlight, because you're like, oh, I don't know as much. People are gonna think like, who is this person? Like, she has nothing to teach me, or like ways that you hold yourself back, which you would never do to somebody else, right? That was your client or your student or even a stranger, right? That it's like, it can be funny in a touching way to think about, like, sometimes if you really pay attention to how you talk to yourself, maybe not always, but some of the times, and you're like, would I ever actually talk that way to somebody else? So like, for example, with my husband going through the cancer journey, and I've shared like how this year, January, was really challenging. But for a minute there, I kept finding myself with thoughts like, oh, we already went through so many hard things. Like, this should be easier for me. Meaning, because my husband had oral surgery. It was like a side effect to one of the cancer medications. And so I was like, this shouldn't affect me so much. I should be used to this by now. And I really, when I paused and thought, like, would I ever say that to a client or student? And not just because I'm nice, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't believe that. There's no way if somebody was, helping a loved one heal, I wouldn't be like, well, you should be over that already. You should not feel bad at all. I would never say that, ever. And yet my thoughts can say that to me, right? And so just be with that. Just be with like, okay, first of all, the fact that as a helper, you're wired to understand deeply how harmful words can be, how harmful a tone can be, how hurtful a look can be. Like, you know that, like, so many of my clients are just as sensitive as I am, and they're like, they know how, when somebody's going through their healing journey, or when somebody's trying something new, when somebody's putting themselves in a vulnerable situation because they want to lead, they know what a tender time that is. And they would never speak to them in a rude tone or give them a look or be like, you should be further ahead. They would never do that. They would never think of doing that. And yet to themselves, they can. And please know, I do the same, right? Like, and so I really want you to like, just kind of be with that. Like, wow, that is really, what's the word? Like that is really important to notice. That on the one hand, I'm wired, designed to express love towards others. And yet towards myself, it can be so incredibly challenging. So the core question here is why? Why is it like an epidemic for helpers to withhold love from themselves? Why is that? And there's 3 main reasons. I'm not going to share all of them here because then this would turn into the masterclass, right? In the masterclass, I'm going to go into the 3 because I think it's essential for us to understand the 3 reasons, because then okay, this is one way I get hooked. This is one way I get hooked. This is another way I get hooked. In this episode, I'm going to share one of the ways, which is a really essential one. This is like a really specific to helpers. And this is all about the Martyr Helper identity. It's all about the conditioning and the programming, I call it the Martyr Helper identity, that helpers go through. Now, I don't mean like you literally go to a school where they teach you, this is how to be a Martyr Helper. Although sometimes that can happen. But anyway, it's really the things we've learned directly or indirectly about what it means to be a good person, a good helper, especially for women. So it could be including, like we have to save others, we have to rescue others, we have to sacrifice our well-being for others. There's this like subtle message that self-love is selfish, that self-love is narcissistic. This like feeling that when you're harsh with yourself, that keeps you humble. Oh, if you want to be a really good helper, you have to be humble. And in order to be humble, you have to like beat on yourself constantly. Even if you didn't have people telling you that, right? Because I know sometimes I'm like, well, my parents never said those things to me, like verbally. And I didn't go to Catholic school or anything like that, which can be like a place where these messages are explicitly shared. Not all, but that can happen. Yet it's in the air. We live in that collective energy. So there's this like virtue of like valuing others more than you. There's also this like, well, let me talk about this. What does this cost? When we are in that place of believing that to be a good helper, we must put others before us, what does that lead to? And to be clear, and because of that, we're being very harsh with ourselves, right? Comparing ourselves to others, feeling inadequate in some way, right? I already said these, right? Like judging where we are in our journey. What does that lead to? First of all, it feels awful. It leads to suffering, even if it's a low-grade suffering. It leads to avoiding leadership opportunities. Because there's this constant hum in your head that you're not good enough, you're not ready, you can't handle it, or that you need to be humble and not be in the spotlight. So there's like there could be a very conscious or unconscious avoidance of leadership. So you might not even think, well, you might not think I'm avoiding leadership because maybe you're very, very present and you're doing a lot in the world, which is amazing. But when we still have those lack of self-love, I can guarantee you, and I include myself in this, that there's some leadership you're avoiding. And what does that look like? I don't necessarily mean like somebody says, hey, come, teach a class in my center. It might not look like that, but it's more energetic. Like you're blocking these higher leadership opportunities is the right word, from coming to you. And this can show up. You can notice that if you keep finding yourself in classes where you're like, oh, I would do this way. You're kind of in your head imagining how you would do it. And this isn't a judgment. This has happened to me so much. And it was like a hint for me, like, okay, I am being called to teach classes. And rather than like sitting here and reworking the class in my head, it's like this, my soul saying, you're meant to be teaching classes like this. Also, when we don't give ourselves the love, then we are constantly seeking validation from external things. We need people to tell us we're doing such a good job. We want people to be pleased with us. We don't want to disappoint others. We don't want to be judged. Not that anybody exactly wants that, but we operate, whether subtly or very explicitly, from that place. So we censor ourselves. And it also leads to this endless self-correction. It's like this constant, this is part of the martyr helper identity, feeling like you constantly need to be corrected, fixed. And this is different than being reflective and insightful about your journey. That's important. But when we operate from this place of like endless correction, think about where that keeps you. Imagine that. Imagine you moved in with somebody and all they did all day long was correct you. Well, you should eat that way, that you're eating that wrong. You shouldn't do that. You should walk this way. Oh, you shouldn't read that. You should read this. Oh, you should be further ahead. Like if that's all you heard all day long, like it would be like so painful to live with that person and your confidence would dwindle. And yet we can do some semblance of that to ourselves. It's like our inner world can feel like, or you can feel like you're under constant surveillance, but it's from yourself. And so when you hold back love from yourself, what you're doing is disconnecting from your soul. And I'm going to go into more depth about that in the masterclass. But for now, just know that the frequency of your soul is unconditional love. Your soul, when your soul beholds you, your soul just sees beauty and wisdom and light and love. And so whenever we are expressing the opposite of self-love towards ourselves, it's like we're disconnecting from our soul. On the one hand, we can never disconnect from our soul because we are a soul having a human experience, but we disconnect from being able to receive the insights, the intuition, the guidance, the wisdom. So with all of this, you can see how this reduces your impact. You simply cannot have the impact you're meant to have on the world with lack of self-love. Now, I want to be clear with this because this is the truth. Self-love is a practice. It's not a personality trait. It's not like, oh, some people love themselves, some people don't. No, it's an ongoing practice. So I'm not suggesting that I love myself every second of the day, all day long. Absolutely not. It's a constant recalibration, but it's a commitment to the practice, which is why it's so important for you to understand self-love isn't indulgent. It's not about bubble baths or massages or even going on retreat, although all of those things can be an expression of self-love. I had an amazing massage yesterday. It was like a hot stone massage with like a energy clearing and all of these things wrapped into one. And it was an expression of self-love. I needed that. So I'm not saying those are bad or wrong. But the problem is when we use those as like band-aids, or we think like, okay, that's what self-love is. I gotta go get a massage. I gotta go do my bubble bath. I gotta like light a candle. But if the inside of our head is still harsh, if we're still having harsh thoughts towards ourselves, it doesn't matter what amazing things you do to yourself, because inside you're still beating yourself up, even if it's subtle. So I said that self-love is a practice, not a personality trait. So I want you to think about this. When we are committed to the practice of self-love, so I want you to really hear that, because one thing that the ego loves to do when we're hearing teachings like this is to be like, oh, this is going to be too much work. I can't do this. It's going to take me too long. But I'm not saying that you have to love yourself 24/7, and if you don't, you're not going to have impact. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we must commit to the practice of self-love. Now, because it is a practice, and because we have a human body and a human brain along with being a soul, of course we're going to fall off. Of course there's going to be moments where deep harshness gets triggered towards ourselves. Of course, that's going to happen. Expect it to happen. It's going to happen. But then it's what we do, right? It's like committing to the practice of self-love. Not beating yourself up for not being loving with yourself, right? That would defeat the whole purpose, right? It's like, because what happens is when you commit to self-love, when you commit to having your own back, when you commit to just like being gentle with yourself, and that doesn't mean coddling, right? So for example, let's say your soul is giving you guidance to go share the teachings of the book you wrote, right? Or even like do like a social media post, or go on LinkedIn and like write a post so that companies that maybe need your services can find you. Coddling would look like, first of all, let's say you're being guided to do that, and you just feel so nervous, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about doing that. So much is coming up for me, insecurities are coming up for me. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do it. Coddling would look like, oh, you're right. That feels bad. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Go watch TV instead. Wait a few months until you're ready. Go take a speech, what is it? Oral speaking course first. That's coddling. Your soul doesn't coddle. Your soul knows you're ready, knows your capacity, but it's also incredibly compassionate. So self-love would look like right? It's all about your self-talk. It'll be like, oh, of course I understand. I'm nervous and scared. It is scary to put myself out there, but I'm going to do it anyway because it feels way worse to just keep fantasizing about it. I'm going to do it anyway. No matter what happens, I'm just going to love myself afterwards. Maybe I'll call a friend who's supportive, or maybe I'll connect with my coach so she can help me too. Maybe I'll go pray before I do it, right? That's self-love. It's like your soul is like the most amazing mother ever. That's like, I know you've got this. You're amazing. You have so many gifts. The world needs everything you have to offer. You're nervous. Of course you are. I'm going to love you. I love you so, so much. And I'm here the whole way. But go do it. You can do it. You can do it. That's our soul. And so think about when you're loving yourself that way. You suddenly, slowly but surely, stop needing other people to like what you're saying, what you're sharing. You no longer water down your message for fear of being judged. You little by little let go of codependency. And codependency is where you feel beholden to others. Well, I don't want to say this because I don't want to get them upset. Well, I don't want to say this because they're going to be disappointed. Well, I don't want to show them this part of me because then they're going to judge me. I mean, think about God, the universe, the divine, who wants to use you in the best way, right? As an instrument to bring blessings to the world. But if each time you're like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. Like the blessings that can pour forth through you are very limited. It's like a bumpy road. But when we commit to loving ourselves, then suddenly we just keep showing up. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have sad feelings, bad feelings, or anything like that. They're going to happen, but you know how to have compassion for yourself. And you keep showing up. So I want you to think about, for example, if we think about a figure like Jesus, and I'm talking about this not from the religious perspective, but from Jesus, a historical figure, an ascended master. You could think about Buddha as well and others. But if we think about Jesus, he's a great example for this. Because I really want you to understand, even if you're not, please know I'm not coming at this from a Christian perspective, although I know Jesus is in that cosmology. But I want to show you this to really understand how lack of self-love, and maybe for you it's like self-respect, high regard for yourself, having your own back. And in the masterclass, I'm really going to like help you like identify all the different flavors and colors of self-love. Because I think when we use the word self-love like a blanket statement, it can be confusing. So I'm going to really sort those out for you. But imagine, so we know Jesus, right? Historical figure Jesus. Like there were so many groups of people that wanted him to behave a certain way, right? The zealots wanted Jesus to be a warrior that came and fought the Romans, right? With his sword and like, or knife or whatever weapons. But Jesus wasn't, that's not what he was about. He wasn't about overthrowing the government. The Pharisees, which were like the religious leaders, wanted him to follow all the rules and like all the religious rules of the time. Like that's what a spiritual leader should be. But he came and I mean, so many of those, he was like, nope, you're focusing on the wrong things. So they were mad at him. The people in his town in Nazareth were like, who does this person think he is? Like, who does he think he is to be this like leader? And so think about yes, of course, somebody like Jesus would have a deep devotion to God, to spirit. And I think when we have self-love requires that, but also he had his own back. He had high regard for himself, his thoughts, his vision, his mission. If he didn't, he would have caved. He would have been like, ooh, the Pharisees are going to get mad at me when they hear this. Ooh, the zealots are mad at me because I'm not like going into battle and overthrowing the Romans. Ooh, my town's going to be like, who does he think he is? And he would just been paralyzed, done nothing. But because he practiced that, he was just true to the vision, true to the mission. And I know that's like a religious, spiritual example, but that's any historical leader that you admire, or even current leaders, if there's some that you admire, that it requires that, right? It requires not needing others to pat us in the back and be like, you're doing a good job. It's wonderful when that happens. It's amazing. But as many people have said, if everyone agrees with you, then you're not leading fully authentically. Because that's just impossible that I know people that are drawn to my teachings resonate with them, but there's plenty of people would be like, this makes no sense to me. And that's okay. They're not my people. That's okay. And so again, for you to really understand, wow, self-love is my responsibility. It is essential. It is how God, Spirit, the divine can use my gifts in the most transformative way for myself and the world. So I'm going to share with you this simple practice. So first, you're going to remind yourself self-love is a practice. It's not a personality trait. It's not like you either have it or you don't. That was my mistake. That was my misunderstanding. Nobody explained this to me when I was young. I was like, well, I don't know how to do self-love because it's like impossible. I just didn't know. I didn't understand. So it's a practice. And because it's a practice, it needs to be practiced. And then number two, I invite you to notice in your service, in your leadership, in your creativity, where does lack of self-love show up? So where do you compare yourself to others? Where do you shy away from the spotlight? Where do you beat yourself up, even if it's subtle? I guide you to do this. Like what I've started to do is like because sometimes it's so ingrained in us that we don't even realize it's just in our head. It's just in our head. It's just in our head. Like, oh, I shouldn't be worried about this. Why am I doing this? And so if you notice that, just start saying it out loud. I mean, if you're by yourself, it might be a little weird, I guess. If other people are around, they might be like, why are you talking to yourself? But start to notice, what are the words you're telling yourself? Just notice if you're like, oh, why am I still struggling with this? What's wrong with me? Why can everybody else figure this out and I can't? Just say those things out loud to yourself and realize like, oh, that's a way I'm not expressing love towards myself. Does that actually work to treat yourself like that? Does it actually bring out the best in you? And the answer is no. Maybe in the moment it has you hustle and work hard. But if it's coming from that place, ultimately it's never going to have the impact you want. And it's not going to feel fulfilling and joyful to you. So that's step two, is you're just going to notice, and this is really essential. Notice it with curiosity, not judgment. Right? It's like, oh gosh, those are all the places I'm holding love back from myself. Like I can have a lot of compassion when I'm like, oh my gosh, after all this year that I went through with this cancer thing with Greg, now he's got this oral surgery. Like, of course that would be hard. Of course that's challenging. I'm just going to like really send myself so much love, or ask my soul to do that. And then you're going to ask the question, how can this berating become self-regard? So self-regard, I love that phrase, is like really regarding yourself with respect, with compassion, with understanding, with kindness, just like you do for others, just like your soul does for you. Because when your soul looks at you, that's all your soul does. It holds you in high regard. So how can this berating become self-regard? Just start to get those answers. Start to be curious. And remember that self-love is not indulgent. It's not naive. It's not a luxury. It's not a woo-woo thing to do. It is courageous. It is, I would say, radical. True self-love. It is something that requires commitment and devotion and practice, which is why so many people don't do it. One reason they don't understand, right? Like just like I didn't. And then it can feel like a lot of work, but I want to say this. Yes, it's a lot of work in some ways, but it's way easier than living with that constant self-berating, self-judgment, and like having that hold you back from truly sharing your gifts, from the joy of living full out, living full, like, yeah, putting yourself out there in a deeper, more impactful way. So if this resonated, I mean, this whole month, there's so many offerings. And I know in marketing, they're kind of like do this thing where they suggest you don't invite people to too many things because people get overwhelmed and they're like, all right. So they say like one at a time. And sometimes I follow that, but sometimes I don't. I'm going to count that I believe you can handle all the invitations. I want you to think about it like I'm throwing like all these parties this month. Amazing, beautiful celebrations, educational parties, parties where the angels are going to be and the ascended masters and your beautiful soul is going to be there with you. And you're not going to be like, it's too much. Instead, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I can't wait. That's the way I'm offering these. So I have free meditation for helpers every Monday this month. This Monday was the first one of the month. So sign up for those. There's, as I said, the masterclass on the 25th. Both of these are free events. There's the weekly podcast episodes. I am doing a very special evening class with my dear friend Robbie Kearns, who is the founder of Guidance from Gratitude, and that is on February 17th, the first day of the year of the snake and a new moon. And that is using a mission statement as your personal compass, something like that. So we're going to talk about what that means. So there's a lot of fun things. And last but not least, if you want to meet with me privately, I would love to talk. I've opened new slots this month for free sovereignty consults. This is a time for you to be listened to with compassion, to get clarity about where you want to go, get clarity on what are the actual obstacles. Maybe it's the lack of self-love. I actually think for all of us, that's one of the obstacles. And I can help you get really clear. Well, what does that look like for you? What's a plan moving forward? And then if it resonates, if you want to hear more, if I feel I can help you further, I'll share the details of my coaching programs with you. All right, so all of this will be in the comments page. Sign up for my newsletter if you're not, because that is the best way to stay on top of stuff, because I also feel like there's just more stuff that's going to come forward and I'm going to be like, I'm going to do this, because I love doing those videos when I'm taking a walk around Mexico here. So a lot of times teachings come through for me there differently. So, all right, want to show you one last thing. This is the card I pulled for myself, but I wanted to share it with you because I feel like this is so important. It says faith. This is Archangel Faith. Moving mountains. Trust in your ability to create miracles. The impossible is becoming possible. And for me, how this relates to this class is, I know sometimes truly shifting to having an environment of self-love inside of you can feel impossible. Like if you're someone that just has kind of like had a whip behind your back, like your own whip. Like I have some of that your whole life. This idea that you can actually have high regard for yourself most of the time, that could be your default setting, could feel impossible. It could feel like that's an impossible task, but it's not. And I feel like that's what this card is saying. This card is saying it's not impossible because it's actually meant to be natural. So I'm just going to pull a card for the group and then we will be done. Thank you so much. Everyone who's here. I can't quite see who's here. Roxana, I see you're here. I don't know who else is here, but thank you. And I know there's lots of you who will listen in the replay. Share anything you want to share. Ooh, this one fell out nicely. Share anything you want to share in the comments. Like what spoke to you? Where do you notice you? Or even in the comments when I upload the replay, where do you notice this is showing up for you in your service, in your creativity, in your leadership? So this is the Archangel we got. This is from Kyle Gray's Archangel Oracle. I thought I had the book here, but I missed it. Okay. Hope. Authentic reclamation. It's time to call back all the lost parts of yourself. Look at this. And for me, self-love is essential for this, because sometimes when we're not expressing self-love, parts of ourselves might not feel safe to express themselves. We need to create that safe environment within ourselves And that's when your gifts, your power, your presence can truly rise up. All right, I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to keep walking this month of self-love. Sending you love. Bye-bye.